From Star Wars and Scream to Toy Story and Spider-Man, so many movie franchises are returning in 2026 that it could be called the year of sequels. While some of these sequels are expected entries in ongoing franchises and some are long-awaited returns of dormant IPs, there is a third brand of surprising franchise movies this year that has been causing a stir in the film community, inviting both excitement and skepticism. A few iconic films that don't need any sequels are returning this year as franchises, which is naturally a cause for speculation. Some of the most exciting sequel movies of 2026 include Ready or Not 2 and The Devil Wears Prada 2, and the former's quality is proof that seemingly unnecessary sequels can be great if the writers and directors are creative, which is promising for the latter as well. However, the most anticipated sequel movie of 2026 is probably Aaron Sorkin's The Social Network sequel, The Social Reckoning. Succession star Jeremy Strong is set to take over as Mark Zuckerberg in place of Jesse Eisenberg, but with Sorkin writing, we can expect the dialogue to be fast-paced, brimming with information, and sarcastic, and the movie to make witty social commentary. If, like me, you can't wait for the movie to be released, especially because it's been a while since Sorkin's snappy and self-aware style of writing has embraced our screens, there is a 21-year-old movie that will scratch the itch for now. Thank You for Smoking follows a big tobacco publicist. Jason Reitman's Thank You for Smoking stars Aaron Eckhart as Nick Naylor, a publicist for Big Tobacco, whose official position is as the VP of the Academy of Tobacco Studies. His job involves convincing the whole nation that smoking is actually not bad for health, putting a positive spin on new discoveries, misleading the viewers of the various talk shows he is invited to make guest appearances on, using his charismatic personality to charm people. He is part of a trio of friends with similar jobs, who call themselves the Merchants of Death. Maria Bello's Polly Bailey does the same job as him for the alcohol industry, while David Koechner's Bobby J. Bliss sells firearms to the nation. Nick receives strong criticism for trying to convince America that smoking isn't necessarily bad for teenagers, claiming that if tobacco killed smokers, that would hurt the tobacco industry the most, so the companies have a vested interest in their customers' well-being. Nick is also trying his best to be a good father to his son, who looks up to him, even though his ex-wife, the boy's mother, disapproves of not just Nick's job, but Nick's parenting choices as well. Thank You for Smoking is also one of William H. Macy's best movies, where he plays an anti-tobacco senator, Ortolan Finisterre. The protagonists of both movies are smooth talkers. If The Social Reckoning follows in the footsteps of its predecessor, the protagonist will be a fast-talking charmer who can either confuse or convince you with his unrelenting barrage of jargon and quips. Eisenberg's Zuckerberg talks like he has hours' worth of exposition to dump every second, which contributes in no small part to the social network's appeal. While he doesn't equal Eisenberg's syllables per second rate, Eckhart's character is an even slicker conversationalist in Thank You for Smoking. Fans of The Wolf of Wall Street will also love the movie Thank You for Smoking for the same reason. Nick even explains to his son that he does what he does because if you can put a positive spin on tobacco despite its obvious links to death and disease, then you can be a lobbyist for any cause. The amorality and the manipulative capabilities of Nick Naylor are similar to Jordan Belfort's and Mark Zuckerberg's in their respective biopics. Thank You for Smoking also explores corporate greed. Nick Naylor isn't a separate agent. He might be the best in the business, but the reason his job even exists is that corporations only care about sales, even at the cost of public well-being. The same self-awareness that makes The Social Network such a riveting drama can be found in Nick Naylor's inner voice, even though the ending seems like the movie misses its own point. Irrespective of the strength of Nick's characterization, Thank You for Smoking never pulls its punches when satirizing corporate culture. The debates with Senator Finisterre, the corporate board meetings, and Nick's interactions with Hollywood people wittily investigate how morally bankrupt everyone is. In a similar vein, The Social Network is ruthless in its exploration of the greed that motivates everyone in the corporate world. Both movies culminate in a courtroom session. Aaron Sorkin debuted as a screenplay and a screenwriter with his eponymous play, A Few Good Men, and later its film adaptation. Over the length of his illustrious career, he has regularly revisited the courtroom drama genre, and he even won the Academy Award for The Social Network, which is as much Facebook's origin story as it is a legal drama. The film unfolds non-linearly, but the final act of The Social Network is largely focused on the legal proceedings. Similarly, Nick Naylor attends court in the final act of Thank You for Smoking, and much like Eisenberg's Zuckerberg, Eckhart's Naylor is smug in court, using condescending language and refusing to admit any guilt. The courtroom sessions in the two movies are distinct in tone, and The Social Network does a much better job of exploring Zuckerberg's flaws than the other film does Naylor's, who remains so self-satisfied until the end that Thank You for Smoking feels tone-deaf, even if the movie has one of the biggest moral dilemmas ever. Thank You for Smoking's dialogue is reminiscent of Sorkin's work. Watching a fast-paced movie written by Aaron Sorkin feels like watching a stage production, since everyone's constantly talking, often with the awareness of an implied or literal audience within the film. So, Nick Naylor's inner monologue, which flows so rhythmically at times that it feels like hearing someone recite lyric poetry, naturally reminds me of Sorkin's screenplays. Sorkin also has a tendency to explore moral bankruptcy, and while Thank You for Smoking uses a much more humorous style of dialogue that is clearly intended as satire instead of drama, it is still similar to how Sorkin approaches a conflict. Watching Thank You for Smoking today and knowing that it was released half a decade before The Social Network makes me wonder why the movie is not talked about more. Its message is still clearly